Here we are in our 23rd year on An Hour with Bob, and our first guest of 2014 is my good friend, General Reginald Centracchio, on An Hour with Bob. Let's get the show on the road. Good evening, folks, and welcome to this edition of An Hour with Bob, 2014. It is already, folks. Can you imagine? General Centracchio, my good friend, longtime friend. Nice to see you, and I'm so happy that you could stop by in my first show for 2014.
Well, I'm honored to be in this position. Yeah, this is an honor position. You know, the first show for the first time for the year. That means something to me. It does.
It is great to have you here. I wanted to do the show on a nice light show. Well, maybe it may not be a light show. To do the show, kind of a different show than normal. Just talk about the year, talk about 2013, talk about where we're going in the state, where we're going in the world. And how was your life? How's things going in your life?
You know, personally, I think it's been real good. Certainly, you always wish for better, but I can't ask for any better as far as my family's concerned. You know, 10 grandchildren, all beautiful kids, and the youngest is 3, and the oldest is 16, and everything in between. And so, from that point of view, it's been really outstanding.
How's Linda doing?
Linda's doing fine. You know, we're getting ready to do a few trips here and
there. Huh?
Go down to Florida and
Hawaii.
And Hawaii too, and just to visit some old places that we've seen before. But we want to spend more time on the Big Island. If you've not been there, that's the place, as far as I'm concerned. You need to see the monuments, you need to see the Arizona, the Missouri, and so on. But you know, Honolulu itself is a city, and you want to get beyond that to experience the full flavor of Hawaii. So that's what we're going to do, and I'm looking forward to it.
Now, they have an active volcano over there?
Yeah, they do. In fact, the last time we went, we were actually standing on the hardened lava. And the park ranger said, you know, we're okay with this. He says, but be aware that underneath it, there's still some active volcano going on. And you can feel the heat. Certainly they wouldn't let you on it if it was going to cave in. But you don't know when that thing is going to erupt. But you look on the other side, and there's still an active river of lava going right into the ocean, making more island. And so it was really amazing to see the kind of choices you have on that big island. Ranges from a deep valley to high mountains with snow on it,
right?
To an active volcano, clearly pristine beaches, jungle, and everything you can possibly expect to see in an environment in a tropical way. Is there, so that's where we want to spend more time.
And it is amazing that the difference. You can, like you said, you can see snow, and you can see 85-degree weather, 90-degree weather, right?
I'm not quite sure how big Hawaii is itself, the island of Hawaii. Many people don't refer to it as that. They say the Big Island, but that is Hawaii. Then of course you have Maui, Kauai, and Oahu, and several other smaller ones. But if you took Hawaii itself, really, and you placed it in the center of New England, you get the same experience here, ranging from the beaches to a mountain where you can go skiing. Even in the state here, down along southern area where you have beaches and you get into the Diamond Hill and you can go skiing and from time to time. And you get up in New Hampshire and Vermont and you got basically the same kind of thing you can experience on one island in the middle
Really?
of the Pacific.
So we're comparing Hawaii to Rhode Island, huh?
Well, if I were the governor, I would certainly leverage that.
Well, by the way, I've always said that they should hire me as the ambassador to the state of Rhode Island for tourism, because I would promote this state much better than it's promoted and has been promoted in the past.
You're right. You're right. We've lost sight of what our most important and precious commodity
Asset.
is.
That's our biggest asset.
It is, and we've not leveraged it. We've looked at everything else, ranging from more taxes to gain more revenue, to spend it on who knows what. But we've lost sight of such beautiful things as Newport.
Yeah.
Such beautiful things as our entire bay, and we've just lost, I think, sight of where we should be going with that. And I do believe we can be very competitive, providing you take all of the tax constraints out and you make it competitive from that point of view.
Right.
Then you can have a Mecca here that would be second to none, I believe.
Exactly. I mean, they knew it 200 years ago that Newport was the tourist. It was the first tourist Mecca. From the start, it was the.
When they threw Roger Williams out, he says, "You think you'd throw him in? I know what I got here."
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So,
really.
Yeah.
And that's why, that was the reason I don't want to get into the political thing, but that was the reason why I ran for lieutenant governor. And you ran for lieutenant governor also. Hey, we got two former candidates for lieutenant governor here. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, both of which would have been better than perhaps some of the previous choices.
Exactly, exactly. And that was my platform. I thought that everybody says the lieutenant governor, they don't do anything, the office doesn't mean anything, but my whole philosophy was to turn that office into an office for tourism, to create, part of it was anyway.
You know, Bob, when you ran and I ran, I think the thing that used to bother me most was that very statement by most of the people that would look at it from a negative point of view, specifically, Healy across the bay. Number one, when he ran, he said he was going to delete
Abolish it.
Number one, you can't do that to begin with,
Right.
without a constitutional convention to take it off the rolls. Nevertheless, having said that, I like Bob personally, but I
Sure.
think his plank and his platform that he used was totally out of whack. But having said that too, I think the lieutenant governor's position, I believe people are finally starting to see it is a necessary position, but it must be linked to the governor.
Right.
And several years ago, you remember that the biggest battle we had, which allegedly was won by the separation of powers, giving the executive branch equal power to the legislature and obviously the judicial, that went by the wayside because
Right.
they kept diluting the executive branch. To me, the executive branch is as equally important as the other two.
Right.
You have to have a governor and lieutenant governor on the same sheet of
Ticket.
music.
They should be together.
Exactly, so you could exercise and administer the state, and people forget that's the purpose of the governor. It's not to make laws, it's not to really enforce laws.
Right.
It's to administer
Exactly.
those laws that are on the
Legislate.
book.
Legislate is for the legislature.
Exactly. And so when you look at the executive branch, that's the guy that really needs to set the leadership role, and the lieutenant governor needs to be part of that.
Right.
So you have a strong position in the executive branch that can, in fact, be to some extent an equal and rightly counterpart to the legislature. Without that, you have them standing out here, nothing more than a figurehead, unfortunately.
And you know what's amazing? When a guy like, say, Kacheri runs for governor, wins the governorship with 125,000, 130,000 votes, and yet he takes a back seat to a guy like Gordon Fox or the past
Any speaker.
that gets elected with less than 5,000 votes.
No.
And gets elected by only the people in his ward or his representative district. And the governor has to cow down to that man that's only elected by not even a city, only by one area of a city.
Right, exactly.
And he has more power than a guy that was elected by by an area 25 times more. Statewide.
Vote, yeah. And that's not going to change, unfortunately, until we have some realization that the current concept we have is not working. I don't know when that might
And it
be.
doesn't work. It has never worked.
no.
I looked it up. Gordon Fox got elected by 4,900, and not by a plurality of 4,900 votes. That's how many votes he got. 4,900 and some odd votes he got elected. He had gotten in an election, not this past election, the election before that. 4,997 votes.
Yeah.
In that same election, Kacheri got 127,000 votes. Now, how is it that Gordon Fox has substantially more power than a guy that got elected?
Because we have a faulty constitution.
Absolutely. And we have the 49th weakest governor in the United States.
Yeah. And you know, I often, if Elizabeth Roberts is out there listening and watching,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I'm not telling stories out of school, but one of her statements always continues to impress me. I'm not sure which way, but she said the purpose that they have a lieutenant governor and a governor in a separate party is because the people want to have a lieutenant governor to watch over the governor, to make sure that he's not going to get away with something that isn't perhaps within the realm of what a governor should be doing.
Really?
Somewhat of a watchdog. And I said, that's totally unreal. You know, you have a lieutenant governor and governor should be on the same party, same sheet of music, marching down the road to make sure that the state is being administered properly and not having two divisive people in the same executive branch. Totally, I could never understand that. But
Right.
apparently, you run on a platform, people buy into that, and they bought into it for several years now.
Well, you know what's amazing also? Do you know what department in government, in the state government, has per person the highest salary of each member of that department? It's the lieutenant governor's office.
Really?
In other words, each person in that department, their pay is the highest per person of any department in the state.
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't get into that. But if you're saying that, I accept that. But I think the office itself is only about maybe $1 million worth of revenue that comes in out of the general fund. $1 million versus an $8 billion budget, which is being used to say we're going to save money, is in my opinion, ludicrous. But people buy into that, unfortunately, and it's how you get elected, by telling people.
The chief of staff makes $165,000 a year.
No, that's wrong.
The chief of staff makes more than the governor makes. Her
Wrong.
chief of staff makes
Absolutely
more
wrong,
than
yeah.
the governor makes.
Most of the staffers, and unfortunately in all of the branches, made more than the adjutant general of the state of Rhode Island. The salary of that office is only about $100,000. So,
Your job.
yeah, the job I had. And so when you look
Which
at the
is a
responsibility,
job, which is work.
when you look at the responsibility,
Right.
Versus a staff position,
That's amazing.
it's really a totally out of whack scenario. So, but everything is not geared on money. I understand that. Yeah, but I think one day we should start to recognize accountability and responsibility for the position that people expect you to do.
Well, you can go further than that. Look at the staffers of the staff members of the chief of staff of Piva Weave, the chief of staff of Gordon Fox. They're making $150,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah,
The chief of staff of a part-time legislature
yeah.
making $150,000 a year. That's
Tell you,
amazing.
There's a lot to be
I
said.
wish I
could
had
go
a
on
job
for-
like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
we
that's
could
a
go on
great.
forever talking about it. But I do believe in, you perhaps share the same consider, for a state with, from time to time, less than 1 million people. That's 1 million people, but that's not 1 million voters. It's not 1 million people who actually participate in the economy of the state. To have the kind of legislature we have is out of whack, and the kind of 39 towns and cities we have, and all of the other intermediate responsibilities. And I've said this too before, and that's probably why I didn't get elected.
Yeah,
We
me too.
we need to go to a county-basis government,
Right.
and we only have 5 counties. I used to go to meetings, Bob, and I'd sit between Texas and South Carolina, and I'd stand up to say something, and they pull me down by my belt and say, I have ranches bigger than your whole state. Now sit down. But they had school systems that had 1 million kids in one school system.
Right.
And what do we have? 39 different towns and cities, each have a school system, plus the charter schools and the parochial schools and numerous other institutional, educational institutions that totally, in my opinion, way out of whack.
Right. Well, that's why there's so much budget. There's so much waste.
Yeah.
That's why you have so much duplication of efforts, and that's why the taxation is so high, because you have, in the case of school systems, in the case of fire departments, police departments, every system, town administrators, go on and on.
Yeah. Well, and now you're getting into another area too. I'm sure that was the show was going to be about. But
No, that
it's a good
wasn't. That had
subject.
nothing. How did we get into this?
I
We
don't
weren't
know.
even going to talk politics.
Sure,
That had
right.
nothing to. We
When
do,
you-
we
when
do
you-
not have anything to do with politics on this list.
But apparently it's important. So
It
we
is
talk
important.
about it.
Go ahead.
So when you talk about why are we here, it's because back to the colonial days, once you establish something and you establish a territorial ownership of something,
No, you don't want to give it up.
you don't give it up.
Nobody gives it up.
You can continue to talk about it, but until you get a whole new approach on how and who and why we are, it's not going to change, and that's unfortunate.
Well, look what happened in Coventry.
Yeah, that's another.
The
Well,
Coventry.
that's a good lead into the conversation about can we in fact afford, and apparently we can't. We can't afford pensions that were made 20 and 30 years ago, because 20 and 30 years ago, you and I should have been dead by now.
Right.
Those actuary tables were based upon a life expectancy.
Yeah.
So when I ran for office, I had a very simple saying: I got some good news and I got some bad news. The good news is we're all living longer.
Right.
The bad news is we're all living longer,
There you go.
because you can't support the systems that were devised based upon actuary tables 40, 50 years ago,
Right.
perhaps, and all of the things that said, well, we'll let the next administration worry about it, and let the next generation worry about it. We're here. This is the next generation that's paying for previous commitments that were made that are not sustainable. And so unless we get that under control, and I always get the answer too from friends of mine who are appreciating a pension, as I am too, but mine's in the military, and I think we all recognize that there'll be changes to that sometime in the future too.
Right.
The thing is, well, I earned it, and I agree. But there's no reason why new kids coming in today, when you raise your right hand in the military, if there's a new system, that's what you buy into.
Right.
It doesn't mean to say because I did it, in my case, 50-some years ago, that it should be sustainable now. It can't be. We're growing bigger as a country. We're getting older. The population is demanding more concern about health benefits and so on, and I recognize all that. But we can't sustain the present programs we have that were devised numerous years ago when the actuary table suggested that most of us should not be here today.
But there's also a big difference too, General. You, like you said, you earned yours and you lived through yours. How many years were you active?
48.
48 years. You earned yours. You didn't go out after 3 years and collect a pension for 45 or 55 years.
Difference, yeah, but in the military too, then there's another example. I understand that if you're a firefighter or a police officer and you've contracted an agreement with the unions and so on, if you can't do that particular job, then you're considered to be disabled. Well, in the military, that's not the case.
Right. And any other job, that's not the
And
case.
if you can't do that job, then you find another job
Right.
you can do,
Right.
because you can be as productive as another individual, but because you can't do that primary job, I think those things need to be visited.
Right. Because why does that work though? Because it doesn't work in any other profession.
In what? Because you have a union contract.
But in any other profession, if you get injured, if you're on disability, that means you can't work.
It depends on the union contract that you have. If you've negotiated that very point, then that's what it is. And until it's changed, either by future contracts or some agreement between the union and the rank and file or the administration somehow, then you change it. Until that point, it won't be changed. So we're in a somewhat of a dilemma as to how do you make those changes. Well, Central Falls is a good example. Woonsocket is an upcoming example. West Warwick is, and several other towns and cities will face the same unsustainable requirements and commitments that were made in previous administrations that just cannot be sustained. And one of the remedies is obviously bankruptcy and being taken over by the state. But there's always a remedy, allegedly, at the state level. The administrative remedy is raise taxes. Okay. Well, the option to that is that people say, "I don't want to go. I'm not going to pay any more taxes."
Right.
And then they vote with their feet and they move to another state, as did our industries.
Right.
Back when Slater Mill first came about, and then you start competing with and as we speak, people say, "Well, we're moving jobs out of the United States." Okay, I don't want to see that either. But if you go to Walmart and you go to those stores that sell you a widget for less money, you're going to buy the widget for less money.
Right.
And you're not really going to ask where it goes from or where
Where
it's
it was made.
made. And so consequently, that's driving the economy. You don't have enough money to buy what you want to buy,
Right.
American made,
American
so you
made.
go buy something that you can't afford that's not necessarily made in the United States. I don't endorse all that, but nevertheless, that's what it is.
You'd like to buy American made.
It is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd like to buy American
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
But
I have a Prius out there, and people would suggest that well, you should buy American. Well, people don't understand either that every car on the market out there that comes across our line, such as Ford, Chrysler, Buick, not all of it's made in the United States.
By the way, isn't the Prius American made?
American made means that it's put together in America, but it's
Right.
not necessarily an American product. But the factories are here, perhaps.
Right.
Some of them are. But I think you have to understand that the economy is based upon a full capability of being able to produce a product that is in fact sellable to someone who has enough money to buy that. And if you don't have enough money to buy it, you're not going to buy it. If you have something that's comparable, you have enough money to buy it, you're going to go buy that. If you don't have enough money to put all kinds of gas into a 15 mile per gallon vehicle, you're going to get something that you get 40 or 50 miles a gallon in, because that's what drives your ability. And people have got to understand that it's a full concern about the economy based upon what you can afford and where you can get it. Love to have everything in America, American made, but that's not the case because it's a world economy.
Right. Right. No, it makes all the sense. It
Yeah.
makes all the sense. And then when you see guys like the perfect example, I mean, I'd be flipping out if I was a union guy and I see the joker like in Cranston working out, pumping iron, and he's on disability. I'd be flipping out if I was a union fireman.
Yeah.
Seeing the guy, to me, he's like he's laughing at people's faces.
Well, it appears that way.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to get into the nitty-gritty of it, and perhaps the court systems will define that at some point. But when right on the front end,
I know people are
face
saying
value,
that to me.
yeah,
People
right.
are telling me
Well,
that.
That's what that's what really matters. It's the perception. Perception is reality in this thing we call.
I mean, a lot of
living.
people are saying that
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. And so when you see something and you don't have it explained to you, then you accept it because that is what you see. And when you get into the nitty gritty, perhaps he's right because that's what the union contracts
Right.
allows him to do, and that's what from time to time physicians have said he's not capable of doing something that he was contracted to do, therefore he's fully disabled. Once again, I'm commenting that based upon my own observations and
Right.
without any clear, definitive ability to make that differentiation other than what I see. And I think I'm joined by many people looking at it from that point of view.
Yeah, it's sad but true. I mean, it might be right. It might
Yeah.
be right, but it doesn't look like that to a lot of people that are not in that established union.
Yeah.
They look at it differently.
Yeah.
Poor guy that's working a non-union job and he's going to work with a bad back and he's hurting and he has to go to work because he doesn't have the luxury of having the big union contract.
Yeah. See, that's one of the good points, and that's really what should be part of the conversation. Well, you don't have that, and you have a bad back, you got to go to work anyway.
Right.
And if you have, our veterans, as an example, coming home because they lost a limb, they may be entitled to some compensation, but that's not going to put what they need for a quality of life to put them in the same position that they would be had they not lost a limb.
Right.
So they're not getting that kind of money that perhaps a full 100% pay would be afforded them, such as, once again, and I hate to use that as a comparative scenario, but perception, once again, is what people see.
Right.
And so if you see somebody that's a 100% disability, lifting weights, and you see a veteran that can't even get a job today,
Right.
there's a problem there. And I'm not talking about socialism. I'm not talking about, everything that's wrong with capitalism. I do believe that you still, if you want to do something in the United States, you can still make a pretty good living if you want to apply yourself.
Right.
But the more we get into all these gimme programs, then that takes away, I think, the incentive for people who want to go out there and make themselves better. It's easier to stay put and let them give you the money.
That goes into we weren't going to talk about it, but now we'll talk about it. What do you think of extending the Social Security benefits?
Well, I think,
not Social Security, I'm talking about the
unemployment benefits. Well, I think, some of that has to be looked at as to being legitimate. But I do believe that at some point there has to be a definitive cutoff.
Right.
Or certainly a depletion on a degradation of
Like
what
slow
you're
it
gonna
down
get.
or
somehow.
lessening it?
Yeah, because
There's no encouragement is what
there
you're
was
saying.
a story I read today about it's cheaper and better for anybody not to go to work.
Right.
If you can
There's
get
no
into a
encouragement is
position.
what you're saying.
There's no incentive, and people would argue the opposite of that, I'm sure. But when you can just sit there and okay, I'm going to go out and look for a job, but I really don't have to go look for a job as hard as I.
Or I'll go work
must.
under the table a little bit.
Well, I don't necessarily endorse that openly anyway. But I think the point is that there has to be some return to responsibility for every individual to be able to sustain themselves in this society. And it can't be because you happen to make more money and they're going to take more taxes out of you to pay for those that don't want to do that. Those that can't do it, I understand that. And that's where the debate needs to happen. Can't versus don't want to.
Right. It gets easier. It gets easier for the person not to go to work versus someone that can't physically go to work.
I think so. I think there's some room for debate there.
There is some room for debate. All right, let's get off that for a minute. How about Robert Gates? What do you think of what he just did?
Well, I tell you, he's really done nothing more than previous secretaries of defense and other cabinet members, except he's articulated it well, in my opinion.
Better, yeah.
Yeah, he's put it in writing about looking to criticizing some of the things that he had to deal with, such as Obama's really non-commitment to the Afghan war and only the political aspects of getting out of there. And you look at it from his point of view as it relates to Vice President Biden.
He really nailed Biden, I think.
Yeah.
He really slammed him.
He said he never made a right decision in all the time he's known him. And once again, I can understand that, his point of view. I don't know that this is good. I understand that it's healthy. But you always keep in mind that if you're seeing something as the President, Secretary of Defense, what is he thinking? And what is the Vice President thinking? Until they're out of office, you don't know. And you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And I guess that's been the case since, George
Beginning
Washington.
of time, yeah.
In fact, I'm certainly not a Lincoln scholar, but, Frank Williams, a good friend of mine, introduced me into something.
Justice Williams, yeah.
Yeah, right. Supreme Court Justice, and great guy, but knowledgeable, extremely knowledgeable on Lincoln.
And a Lincoln guy.
And one of the things he brought to my attention that I never really took much into consideration about was his cabinet that he put together, Lincoln, was mainly of his adversaries. Because
that's interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't really realize that. And he said he wanted to be able to have points of view.
Right, opposite
his, and still have a healthy discussion.
That's good.
Providing they understood that once you have that discussion, you have your ability to voice your opinion.
Right.
Once a decision is made, then you move forward just as though it's your decision. And so I think you still see that in 2014, although you don't see it until after the fact. But I hope those healthy decisions are being devised by input from both sides of a point of view of a particular scenario, especially as we get into the next several years in the Mideast. It's going to be a tremendous challenge as to how we deal with that, and we've obviously proven you can't do it militarily unless you don't have any consideration for human life. So the cultures that
Right.
you and I were talking about, earlier, will determine exactly what we're going to look like in this world several generations from now.
Scary too, right?
Yeah, it is, and I think
Talk about what we were talking about
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah,
The impact of the cultural dynamics being that the average American family is growing at a rate of what, 1.6?
1.6 in the United States. The culture in the United States.
And the average European is what, 1.8?
1.8. Well,
And-
probably somewhere less than that, because you need 1.8 to
To
sustain
sustain
a culture for
sustain
several
a culture,
generations,
right?
in a
So we're
generation.
doing less than the average in
That's
the
correct.
United States. That's
That's
why we need the input of the Spanish language folks.
You're right. You need an input into our culture to sustain our
To
culture.
sustain-
It's going to have at least 1.8
Okay.
children per family. What we're seeing in Europe now, and in the Mideast and other countries that, specifically Southeast Asia and the Mideast itself, with the exception of China.
Right.
Now here's where another interesting point comes in.
And
China,
India.
yeah, but China just, I believe, lifted its
one kid- one
the
child?
one kid per family, one child per family. I think there's some leverage that's being applied to that, because you cannot sustain a culture over a generation unless you have, I believe, the figure is about 1.6, 1.8 children per family. And in the United States, we're right on that teeter-totter. In Europe, they're below that. And so you're seeing a greater impact on the Muslim community throughout Europe, as well as the Mideast, and in general, the entire world, because their propensity to have children is about 8 per family.
8,
8. And that's pretty...
not 1.8.
No, 8 per family. And so when you look at that, it's not going to take maybe 30 or 40 years, maybe a little over a generation before those cultures that it can sustain itself is based upon the number of children you put into a family, and you can enjoy
Wow.
that particular culture. Yeah. It was interesting reading that the other day. I didn't really pay much attention, but when you
So
look...
they will take over a culture
Europe-
in 20 years.
Yeah, Europe, Germany, specifically Spain,
Well,
and
France
England.
already.
Yeah,
I
France,
understand
yeah.
France will be the first European country that they will outvote the entire country within 20 years.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, at least I, and I'm sure you, don't come across as the Muslim community being anything bad.
No,
They're
no.
not. The radical approach to it is. And so when you have a preponderance of people who will eventually vote in a society, and they're driven by value of life, we'll be
Right.
okay. When you introduce into that formula a society that doesn't have value of human life, we are in deep trouble.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, when you see the radicals within those
Well,
communities,
fortunately,
that's scary
they're only a small percentage of them.
right now. And
Hopefully.
that's scary.
Hopefully that stays that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of good out there too, but we need to be careful that we don't allow, as a people, the radicals to start making decisions as the kind of law that's applied within a particular society. I think the radical Islamic would want to see Sharia law, which is pretty brutal,
Right.
and their interpretation of what the Quran is all about. But the Quran itself, and I'm certainly not a scholar in it, but I think the Quran allows and endorses a respect for human life and sustains that value. Unlike the radicals that want to take that and apply it to the only reason they're on earth is to die and go to heaven
Right.
and get their just reward, in their opinion. And that's a scary
I
proposition.
certainly wouldn't want to be a woman under that
No.
that pretext.
No. And you know, look at this 16-year-old kid over in I can't remember the country, Pakistan, I believe. Just wanted an education. They shot.
Oh,
her
the
in
girl
face,
that got shot in the head, shot in the
you know,
face.
so to come back with that kind of courage, that would suggest to you that there's still, you know, a strong possibility that we'll overcome this, and I do believe we will. But it's going to be a real back and forth scenario, and you know, physical war, in my opinion, is not going to be the solution to it. You're talking billions of people out there, and education, I believe, is the solution to being able to.
Well, that's what
sustain.
they're so fearful of, though. That's what the radicals
That's
are so
what they're.
fearful of.
That's
Yes.
exactly right.
Exactly.
And we, as a society, want to encourage education to make sure we have a value of life that's sustainable.
And that's why they don't want, especially the woman, to be educated.
Yeah, I believe that.
Now, you've been over, I've been over Muslim countries before. You've been over Muslim countries before.
Yeah, you know, I didn't really get to socialize and get in the mix of the people in Afghanistan, although I did walk through the streets, and I had a little bit of an opportunity to visit our troops in Iraq as well as Afghanistan, and certainly with you over in Hungary, and on that particular time we met in Bosnia. But the people.
Oh, great! They're
are
beautiful
great.
people.
And
Yeah,
they all
yes.
respect each other.
And
but
did you go to
got this-
Morocco? Did you go to Morocco?
No, I didn't.
I went to Morocco too.
But there's a certain element within the society that are able to sway that society to their points of view. Unfortunately, you know, I'm trying to draw an analogy here.
Yeah.
Certainly not the same basis, so don't take me out of context.
Yep.
But in the United States, one of the most precious things we have is the vote. Yet, even in a general election, you get about 1/3 of the people
It's awful.
to even vote.
It's awful. in
And
this
so
country.
the other 2/3 just sit back and criticize about what's going on when they don't take the time
the
to
most
vote.
precious, the most precious right we have, and yet, on a good day, only 50% of the populace votes. On a good day.
In certain elections, but I think the average is about maybe.
Oh, it's only about 25 or 30%. Yeah, but on a good day, on a real good day, the highest percentage ever, I think, is only about 60%.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And that's on a presidential
Yeah,
election.
that's serious. So when you apply that to the upcoming countries, and they paint their fingers purple to see I voted. I mean, that's got to show you something, that it means something.
You better
but
believe
when you
it
take
does.
it for granted, that can destroy a country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, by the way, in a Muslim country of Morocco, I took the worst beating in my whole life I ever took was in Morocco.
I mean, physical beating?
Physical beating, yeah.
You didn't start Third World War? You?
I did. I got the worst beating of my life in Morocco, and not Marrakesh, where Bogey and Bacall was, and Casablanca.
Yeah.
Going to Casablanca, going to see, looking for Christopher's, the restaurant where supposedly he said, "Play it again, Sam."
Play it again, Sam.
Which was torn down, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went there by train, and I tell this story. I've told this story before. We were in Rabat, the capital, and I took the train there with a camera, and a 5.5-hour train ride, and I'm sitting there with this Moroccan, and he never told me. I'm sitting there with him, talking to him. I got the camera, big camera right on the table. It looked like it was in a dining car, and he was a Moroccan, but he spoke fluent English, and he had been educated in the United States, University of Michigan. Never said a word to me about it. I get off the train, I start videotaping, and it was during Ramadan, I didn't know. I start videotaping in the train station. All of a sudden, somebody nails me, and I was startled, and I turned, I pulled the camera down. When I did pull the camera, I get nailed here, and then I get nailed here, and then everybody starts hitting me. Then I feel somebody grab me and pull me and run out, but I had already been hit a number of times, kicked, hit in the ribs, back, side, everywhere. I mean, I must have got hit 15 times, all bloodied out. I get pulled, running across the street, getting pulled. It was him. I get running down the street, all banged up. And he finally tells me, he goes, "Oh, you shouldn't have been using the camera because it's during their holy time." I go, "I wanted to hit him. Why'd you tell me that before we got off the train?"
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I should have told you.
Just a side story. I went on a cruise not that long ago, and I never had a deep massage. Have you ever had one?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I paid
A Reiki massage.
substantial, money for the massage, and Linda was there with me, and so we had it by the pool, and she said, "What kind of massage do you want?" So I said, "Well, I don't know, what's a lasting one?" So she says, "Well, you want a deep massage." So she said, "Man, I come out of there and I was hurting bad."
Yes.
So I was thinking, if I'd have gone with you, I could have get that for nothing.
Oh, we've had fun though. We've had
We
fun
have,
on our
we
trips.
We had some good
I've only
times.
lost an engine. We were flying over to on our way to Bosnia there over the.
I never saw you cry, but that that was. I remember we landed. I think it was 81 miles an hour wind,
Yeah.
crosswind,
Crosswind.
in largest Air Force Base, and that was
In
was,
the Azores.
yeah. But I'll tell you, that was,
And
in my opinion, that
everybody
was,
said,
probably,
huh?
that was one of the best times.
It
we
was.
ever
It
had,
was
yeah.
the best time. That was,
Yeah, it
one of the best Christmases I ever had.
Christmas Eve and Christmas, and went out to the orphanages, and you put your stickers on the
On
door-
everything.
On everything. On
Don't say the dog. I didn't put it on
You
the
put it
dog.
on the
Somebody else
dog.
put it on the
You-
dog. One of your sergeants put that on the dog. I got blamed for that.
But you put it on the bigs.
I put it on the MiGs. I put it on the tanks. I put it on everything. My round stickers, my an hour with Bob stickers and the Bob's Big Adventure stickers. We had them on everything. That was the greatest trip. I wish you were still the Adjutant General of the National Guard because we had the best times we ever had.
We had some good times,
Yeah.
and I think that was probably, in my opinion, one of the most enjoyable times because you got involved at Christmas time. Troops were really happy to see us. We experienced something I never had before, and that's spending, Christmas with the troops. And I did that several other times. I also spent my birthday in Afghanistan on my birthday, and that was an experience too. But when you take that and you do it, it reminds me of the old Bob Hope shows.
Oh, that's what they were calling me, the new Bob
Yeah,
Hope.
right, exactly. I was just going to say that. and you got the nickname Bob Hope because you went over there and you really interfaced with the troops, and you got their face in the camera, and it was about this far from the nose.
Well, what was so funny was that the Warwick Beacon sent the camera. Well, the editor of the Warwick
Yeah,
Beacon was
yeah.
there, John Howell, and he
Yeah.
had a writer there,
Yeah,
reporter,
Meg Brueggemann.
Meg,
Yeah.
and she was supposed to do a story on the troops and everything. She ended up doing a story about me
Yeah.
because I ended up getting all emotional about the whole thing, about the whole trip, about
Yeah.
my missing my son, and
Yeah.
when we went to see those kids in the orphanage. Oh my God, that was heartbreaking.
That was something. I remember this one kid. I think you might remember him too. He was 17. As I recall, over in that country, when you reach age 17, even though you're in an orphanage, you enter the military, and you
Right.
have to come back to the orphanage every night. And we had something like 25,000 pounds of toys that we
Yeah.
took over there. And this kid we gave him a GI Joe.
Yep.
That was the first toy he ever. He was 17.
Yes.
And we gave him a GI Joe, and that kid, broke down crying, and so did most other people, including me.
And me.
When you see that, and he was just so happy. And it's a 17-year-old kid, and the next morning he was going to be back in uniform, training, and it was just a different kind of society that.
And that kid was the
we
one that
need to
told me
protect.
he watched his mother and father be killed.
Yeah, that was tough stuff.
Yeah.
But and people don't see that side of what the United States military does. That's not the design of the military. It's to go and win wars, but there's a humanitarian aspect of it too, to do exactly what we were doing, and to bring the kind of goodwill.
And I have a
to
picture, and ironically, I was looking at it the night before last. I went up in the gun turret and took a picture of all the Humvees, the caravan of Humvees as we were going, the caravan going in the.
With Santa, the sleigh on one of them.
Yeah. Going over the trail on the way to the orphanage.
Yeah.
We went to 2 orphanages that
Yeah,
day.
we did. That was really.
That
an
was
experience,
probably my best Christmas.
Yeah. And of course, we did several other trips here and there, and
Oh yeah.
down to Cuba, and
Yeah.
as well as some of the training bases, and that was.
How
good
about
stuff.
when we went down to Mississippi and I told you we had my tenant. Remember one of my tenants? was
there.
Was down there, and I busted him. I had I had to call him over. I said I wanted the rent. I come to collect the rent.
No, we didn't do that.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I don't know if you went, but I had somebody get him. I said, get him over here. I want the rent.
I don't know if you did that.
No,
or not,
I
but-
did it. I did it to him. No, I called him. I had somebody get him. No, you weren't there, but I had somebody get him. I want the rent. You didn't know me in rent. I just wanted to bust him up.
You know, those kids, I'll tell you, I can't overemphasize how gifted they are, and how we all Rhode Islanders and Americans should be so proud of the kids in uniform today. Going all the way back to when the country first started, there's a special breed of kids, including the draftees during World War II and Vietnam. Some of them didn't want to be there, but they were there, and while they were there, they served well and did an outstanding job. Today we have an all-recruited, all-volunteer Army, and it's equally as well, if not the best Army we've ever had. But there's a special ingredient that goes with these kids. When they hurt, you don't hear them saying, I want to come home.
Right.
They want to get back with their friends and their buddies, even with a missing limb. I've heard that so many times, and they told me that.
I've
on
seen it.
occasions.
I've seen it so many times.
And you know, you don't get that in one of the mill. When you look at World War II and you say, some of my older friends who are not with us any longer used to fly bombers, and they were 19 and 20 years old. That was a special breed too. And you look at that same 19-year-old kid today, and they're doing equal things. Certainly not flying bombers, but the kind of missions they do are equally as challenging as they were back then, because everything is relative.
And you don't think of that. When I used to think of the National Guard years ago, you used to just think of the National Guard as just doing local stuff in Rhode Island.
There's nothing that bothers me more, and has through my whole career,
Just what I
than
said, huh?
when people say that or think about
Right.
it. They say, oh,
That's why I said
the
it,
old, the old term.
I led you to that.
You gave me angry now. But-
Go ahead, come on. I brought it up for the
But
purpose.
the term, weekend warrior and,
Right.
part-time soldier,
Right.
you put the uniform on once in a while, that may have been true perception-wise.
Right.
Because back then, in the 50s, 40s,
It was true back then.
right, you had an occasional snowstorm, you call out the Guard. I've seen, because I was there, I've seen the Guard go from a part-time, once in a while call up for state duty,
Right.
to a strategic reserve, to today an operational force. In
Absolutely.
fact, the Guard is the United States Army, Air Force, and every other major branch. And in many cases, the force structure allows the Guard to be the command and control element, with the active forces being subordinate to it. So there's been a tremendous change.
No
And
doubt
when
about
people
it.
still refer to it on occasion as a weekend
Weekend
warrior or
warrior.
a part-time soldier, man, that bothers the heck out of me, because they have the slightest idea what they're talking about until they're there, and all of a sudden they see it. And that's why I felt, and I think you've been extremely helpful in telling the Guard story, because unless you get out there and you bring the Guard to people, and you tell them in stories like you told and continue to tell, in the form of the air show, visits, or visits overseas,
Right.
and bring the media with you, there's no other way you can get it out there, because people only read what they want to read, and they're selective in what they want to pay attention to.
Because they don't see much of it. They
Exactly.
They only see the little times that they see them deployed, the little time they see them, the C-130s coming in.
Yeah, the family, now, let me make sure I clarify that. That's not the case with the families and people who have, relatives and other friends who are in the military. They're always there for the deployments and homecomings. We saturate the hangars. But the average John Q. public out there looks at it, and there's really no connection to it. He's thankful, and not certainly doesn't have the attitude that the general public had when kids were coming home from Vietnam.
Right.
That was a
Oh,
totally
that was
different
terrible.
story.
Terrible.
So that today there's a tremendous respect, and people will stop and thank our troops, even though there's no personal tie to it. So there's a big change in the society and how we look at the military, and I think that's only because they've seen it, and the story is told. And the more you tell the story, the more you tell who you are and what you do, the more people understand it, and therefore you have a different perception.
Well, they've had
of
more
it.
connection with it now. They've had friends and relatives, and neighbors that have been through it, that have experienced it now.
Yeah.
I think.
But on the other hand, we also have to be careful. In our General Assembly in Rhode Island and in the United States Congress, there are less and less people who have ever been in the military or have anyone that's ever served. We're fortunate in Rhode Island to have Jack Reed.
Right.
I believe he's the only one that served
Very
in the
few.
military, but if you take that and apply it across the country, there aren't that many.
No, there's not.
So we're blessed with Jack Reed,
Right.
and I have a tremendous respect for
Right.
him.
As I think of them, I can't think of many.
No, there aren't. And
In
know,
Congress?
in Congress there aren't. I think I forgot the percentage, but it's minimal compared to what it was even a few years ago.
You're talking about members, former members of the military that are in Congress or
Right.
in
Or
the
had any
U.S. Senate.
connection with the military, even their
Right.
family members. So it's kind of concerning that when you have less, and therefore when you look at as I have looked at over the last several years, the attempt to degrade the budget by taking hits on the military.
Right.
It's
It's easier
scary.
for them to take hits on it and take money from it because they have no connection to it.
Right. There's $500 billion that have been taken out of the military over the next 10 years. But when you look at people like Jack Reed, who's been extremely helpful
Right.
to the state, when I was in office, we got brand new 130s. We got C-130s.
C-130
got
J's,
brand new
the
Blackhawks.
J's, yeah.
Tremendous infrastructure, which is still being accommodated now. I'm not taking credit for all of it, but a lot of that was conceived during my tenure. But you have the out-year programs that are now coming to fruition. One recent one that I'm pretty proud of was because of the C-130Js.
Right.
This past week, they announced that a simulator would be placed at Quonset, which means that the C-130 simulator will be at Quonset and Keesler Air Force Base, which means we'll be taking thousands of C-130 pilots here in
Yeah.
Rhode Island to train them with a simulator.
Good.
And so that's tremendous. In addition to the Virginia-class submarines, that as well as the Navy War College that Senator Reed has been so instrumental with. Good guy.
Oh, that's great. That's huge. It is huge.
It is. It is.
And people don't realize that in World War II, a lot of the pilots were trained right down here in Charlestown.
The one, and this is the personal experience I had, Bush Sr., I was with him at Quonset, and he said, I was the adjutant general at the time, and he says, General, he says, see that little sand dune over there? He says, it just below Quonset. He said, I almost bought the farm on that one. He said, because he used to train at Charlestown.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know I know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Charlestown was the Navy training center for pilots.
Exactly. They used
And
to
he
take
was one
raw
of the pilots.
recruits, kids that never flew a plane before in their lives used
And
to
he
train
was
them
one
down
of them.
there. Yeah.
And he came over, he said, I almost bought the farm here. He says, I'm glad I'm here to see it again. And so he was one of the pilots that trained at Charleston, which now is Ninigret. And so Rhode Island has a tremendous history. for its
Absolutely.
military,
For military, yeah. Absolutely.
And we need to sustain it. And in fact, recently there were some statistics that were released. Rhode Island, I think, is number 2 as it relates to per capita troops that have been deployed in almost every one of the wars.
Right.
To include, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Gulf War, and certainly Vietnam. So when you per capita, Rhode Island continues to be one of the leaders as far
That's
as
amazing.
Military participation. Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing
Yeah.
to think. The smallest state.
Yep. Even during the Civil War. And Chief Justice Williams also gave me another book recently having to do with the home front during the Civil War. And it talked about the amount of volunteers that came about from Rhode Island they just couldn't accept anymore. So there were waiting lines for people to actually join the Union Army to fight in the Civil War. And I never knew that either. So
We had.
we had more people that wanted to join that they would accept to join the Union forces for the
Really?
Civil War. Yeah, and that was an interesting point that he brought out.
Wow, interesting stat. We got 5 minutes left. Can you believe that?
We didn't even talk about all the
We
stuff
didn't even
we're
get,
gonna
we
talk
got
about.
all this stuff left. We haven't even talked about any
We
of
should
this
talk
stuff.
about the air show, though.
We should mention the air show. We got to talk about the air show. This year we're coming back to the air show.
Yeah.
We got to get I gotta get talking to the new guys over there. Now we gotta get going with the new guys. Who do I talk to at the air
Talked
show?
to Major General Kevin McBride.
McBride, yeah, I know him.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah,
He's doing a good job.
We're going to get the air show. It's going to be in May this year,
Yeah,
though.
May 17, 18.
May 17th and 18th
And the
this
Blue
year.
Angels are coming back.
Blue Angels. We're
Yeah.
one of the few places get the Blue Angels.
That's right.
In
And-
fact, they ranked us as the best place to have an air show.
You're right,
one
exactly.
year, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because of a myriad of considerations, because there's the place, and most importantly, because of the kind of support they get.
They get and the
from
way
the
they're taken
military.
care of. The way they're
Exactly,
taken care of,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. I mean, air is air.
Right.
But to get up into the air,
You got to
need
be
a
on
lot
the
of
ground
logistics and
first.
support
People got to be
first.
taken
Yeah.
care of. Yeah.
So they enjoy coming up here, and they're well treated, and that's probably why one of the reasons we get considered to be from time to time to have one of the significant jet teams, either the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. But
Now,
this year the Blue Angels. Are
Do you
coming back.
know, and I think you do know this, the very first show I ever did on television, ever, was 22 years ago, was the United States National Guard, the Rhode Island National Guard air show, was the Toys for Tots, was the air show 23 years ago, was the Bob's Big Adventure air show at Quonset Point. That was the very first
Really?
television show I ever
Yeah.
did. Do you know that?
I remember you used to do a lot of mine. I wasn't aware of that one, but I mean, you used to bring Zachary with you all the time.
Before Zachary was born, the
Yeah.
very first TV show I ever did was on Bob's Big Adventure, before An Hour with Bob. The very first television show I ever did was Bob's Big Adventure, was the Rhode Island National Guard air show.
Yeah, you've done a tremendous job over the years, and really, I'm not blowing smoke up your nose. You did a real fine job, and I hope you get back into doing that same kind of thing. A lot of people watch this program, and a lot of people see it on a continuing basis versus a 2-minute clip on the regular media. So continue to do it, and I appreciate it. And on behalf of all of us, you did a wonderful job, and get back in there.
Well,
That's
let's hope
that's
we can
an
get
order. Now
McBride to do that. Let's get McBride. We gotta get McBride over here.
Get him on the show.
We
and
gotta
talk
get him
to
on the show. We gotta
Yeah.
talk about the air show. It's what's 17th and 18th?
17, 18 May.
May 17th and 18th. Yeah, that's how I started doing Bob's Big Adventure and An Hour with Bob, was because of all things, it was because of a Navy SEAL. I met a Navy SEAL at Shooters. I used to do the photography down at Shooters, and I met him down there. I was snapping pictures when they did a promo down at Shooters. They jumped in at Shooters. They were the leapfrogs,
Yeah.
Navy SEALs leapfrogs. They jumped there, and 2 of the jumpers from the English jumpers, I can't remember their names, they ended up in a drink, and the guy came over to me. His name was Lewis. He said to me, "Did you get those guys that ended up in the water?" Because he wanted to bust them. Did you get pictures of them in the water? I go, "Yeah." He said, "I'll give you anything you want. I want those pictures to bust them." I go, "Yeah, I got them. He says, "Anything you want. What do you want? How much you want? I'll give you anything you want." He said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get you down on we're doing the show." He said, "I'll get you in the plane." So he snuck me up on the C-130 when they jumped. All of the guys, 40 guys, from the leapfrogs to the British to the Canadians. He snuck me up with a jumpsuit up. You don't even know this. He snuck me up
I wasn't a command.
on the C-130, and I was taking pictures when they all jumped out. And the load master, after they all jumped out, come over and he goes, "Who the hell are you?" And I'm in the back of the thing. He goes, "You're in a world of crap." I go, "Not as much as you're
There
in."
was only one concern with whoever the commander was at the time. I think it was when you landed the C-130, that was a problem.
Only for him. Because I wasn't in the military.
Good times.
So then I became good friends with him. No, we had a lot of fun, though.
Yeah, we sure did.
We had a lot of fun.
Sure did.
That was 23 years ago, folks. So you want to catch that 17th and 18th of May.
Yep.
And thank you for being a friend.
Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for all you do.